Joe Reinagel, Jason Minix, The Blitz on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star.
Welcome back to The Blitz here on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star. Along with Joe Reinagel, I'm Jason Minix with TCU head coach Sonny Dykes in San Antonio to speak at the San Antonio Quarterback Club. But Coach, what a year it's been for you guys.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been an eventful year. A lot of stuff going on. First year's, always crazy when you take over a program, and then, got on a run and ended up coaching all the way till I think January 9th. And so it was a long year, but it was a lot of fun. And, we had a bunch of good players, and it was certainly a fun way to start at TCU.
I know there's no way to realize this when it starts, but when you hit camp last year before the season started, did you know you had a special group?
Not really. Honestly, we came out of spring ball, and we only had 5 scholarship D linemen on our whole team at the end of spring practice, and so we had some pretty substantial holes. We were basically 2.5 scholarship corners, 4 scholarship linebackers. Just had some pretty significant voids in terms of depth defensively. And then we went out and got a couple of guys in the transfer portal that helped us out a little bit, which was huge for us, and had a couple of freshmen come in and play early as well, and really solidified our defensive front. And, we were fortunate, stayed healthy at the corner position all year, and basically got through the year with 4 linebackers. And, we felt like even though we had some voids, that we had a team that had tremendous leadership. We had some really good individual players, but the best thing about last year's team was just we had guys that really bought in and were great leaders, were unselfish. Really, as the season went along, we gained a little bit of confidence. Had a big win against Oklahoma, I think game 4 or 5, and had a little confidence in that. And and then the question was, okay, how's this team going to deal with adversity? And we got down 17 points to Oklahoma State, rallied and won that game, and got down 17 again to Kansas State and rallied and won that game. And so anyway, you looked up and all of a sudden we're 8-0, 9-0, and, going to Texas. And, everybody said, well, we'll find out how good they are when they go to Texas. And our guys, figured out a way to win that game, and then had to win a tough one on the road at Baylor, and just kind of kept figuring out how to win football games. And, looked up and we were in the Big 12 championship. And then, like I said, went on to college semifinals and won there against Michigan. So it was a fun year, but I don't know that any of us would have said we were going to play for a national championship if you would ask us, but we felt like we had the makings of a good team. And I think the best thing we had was just good chemistry, good chemistry and really, really exceptional leadership.
Sonny Dykes joining us here on The Blitz. And as you talk about that and you go through the season and, being down in some of those games, which I'm guessing wasn't part of the game plan, the Baylor game, everybody talks about the end, but you said after that game, that's exactly the way you practiced it, what you wanted. At what point did you think this team has a real chance to play into January?
Probably about week 7 or 8, I think we started to think, looking at it and started going, well, we're actually pretty good. The one interesting thing about this group, though, is we never talked about it one time as a coaching staff. We never talked about, the conference standings. We never talked about the Big 12 championship game. We never talked about the college football playoff. It was something that honestly never came up one time. I never heard our players talk about it. The thing we just kept preaching was, let's take one game at a time and try to win, whoever we play this week. Let's play our best and do a really good job preparing, and, go out and play our best on Saturday and see what happens. And, all of a sudden you look up and we're in the Big 12 championship, and we lost a hard-fought game to Kansas State. And, at that point, we lost a little bit of control in terms of, getting in. But the good thing was, 12-0 regular season with the schedule we played, got us into the playoff and got us a tough draw against Michigan, who, had really been playing well. Had knocked off Ohio State, had blown out Purdue in the championship game, and those guys were really rolling. So, it was kind of a tough draw, but we felt like it was a good matchup and something that we could have a chance to win.
Coach, that's interesting you say that. And I know players, social media and all this kind of stuff, they look at it. Nobody gave you guys a shot against Michigan. How did you handle that with your team? Did you say anything special, or what'd you do?
Not really. I think it had kind of been that way all year. We were picked 7th in the league, in the preseason poll, and we never really talked about that either. I think, the big thing for us was just, really practice well, prepare well, take care of ourselves. We asked the guys to really dedicate themselves, not only during practice, but when they got off the field in terms of recovery and rest and nutrition and doing everything that they could do to give us a chance to go out and play well on Saturday. And, to the players' credit, they really bought into that philosophy. And so, we felt like that was going to be good enough. We really did. I think the guys gained confidence early in the season, felt like they could overcome any challenges that they were faced with and continued to get better and better. And then, we had a knack for making plays in big games. And, Max Duggan, our quarterback, just played outstanding football. And, he just continued to get better and better. And it seemed like the bigger the stage, the better he played.
Sonny Dykes joining us here on the Blitz on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star. Now, you take over the program, you use the transfer portal to your advantage. There's so much talk about, is it good, is it bad, the portal, the NIL. Obviously, it helped you guys last year, but your overall thoughts, we keep hearing the term guardrails or putting in some rules. What does college football need to do to add those guardrails?
Yeah, I think, I've always believed that the players should be compensated, more than they have been in the past. We had all these silly rules about, incoming freshmen couldn't sleep on a player's couch. You saw Boise State probably a decade ago get some pretty severe sanctions for having players sleep on other players' couches. So, the stuff was ridiculous by the NCAA, some of the things that they had. And some of these guys didn't have any money at all. They had their scholarship and it paid for their books, fees, and room and board and all that, but they had no opportunities to earn any money. And so I think things started to correct a little bit, and like they tend to do, I think they probably overcorrected. And now all of a sudden it became the NIL, which again I think is a good thing on principle. I think that we all own our name, image, and likeness, and I think we ought to be able to capitalize on that if given the opportunity to do so. But as you said earlier, the NCAA didn't really come up with any kind of rules to help govern NIL, and people are going to get creative, and that's what happened. They put these collectives together, and all of a sudden, there's truly a pay for play model, which is not really what anybody wants. And so, when you look at that and you look at the transfer portal, I'm in favor of both of them, honestly, because 18-year-old kids make mistakes on why they go to colleges. Sometimes coaches leave, sometimes circumstances change, sometimes kids get homesick, whatever the case may be. I think they ought to have the freedom to leave and go to another school. Now, you combine NIL and the transfer portal together, then you have a problem. And that's what we're seeing now is, if school A needs an offensive tackle, then, they'll call up your tackle and say, hey, we'll come pay you to be our tackle. And that's really not the way it's supposed to be. And I think that what happens is you get kids, again, 18-year-old kids, in some cases 17-year-old kids that, are making decisions that they don't really want to make because they're trying to take care of their family, or, they think there's going to be a better financial opportunity. And, it's like everything else. There's unethical people involved in some of this NIL stuff. And all of a sudden people start making promises to kids and they choose that school, they get to that school, and all of a sudden it's not what they thought it was going to be. And so it's a mess right now. My hope is the NCAA will legislate something. I don't have a ton of faith in their ability to do that. I think in a lot of ways that ship has sailed. And, I think as coaches and as a league in the Big 12, we've got to do our own things and create some answers ourselves, because they could do it.
One of the biggest things I've heard from other coaches is that now recruiting is 24/7, 365. Do you find that you're having to re-recruit some of your guys?
Oh, for sure. That's the most important thing you do all the time. And, I've always thought that's kind of what you did anyway. I always felt like as a coach, your job was to build a strong culture. And in order to build a strong culture, you had to build relationships with people. And, and so what we try to do is at TCU and places I've been in the past is we try to have a very clear set of expectations. We try to have very high expectations for our players, not only on the field, but off the field and in the classroom and in the community. And then we try to have, some pretty severe, penalties if those expectations aren't met. But at the same time, those kids know that we care about them. And I think that they realize that, we care about them not only as football players, but much more importantly as people and young people with a future. And so I think, what I've always tried to do is recruit my team 365 days a year, because you're building a chemistry within that program, and you're building a culture that can sustain itself. And so, the way we interact with our players hasn't really changed that much. I've always believed in kind of that accountability and that positive coaching that we have within our program. We're going to coach guys hard, but we're going to pat them on the head and say, look, here's why we're doing this. Here's why it's important to you. Here's how it's going to make you a better player, and here's how it's going to make us a better team. And I think if you do that with young people, then they'll run through the wall for you.
Talking with Sonny Dykes, head coach at TCU here on the Blitz. Let's have a little fun story time. My high school coach was Hal Mummy, and I know you worked with Hal. You worked with Mike Leach. I need a Hal Mummy story, and I need a Mike Leach story.
Oh man, that could be 2 or 3 shows within itself. It's funny. I drove up here earlier today from Fort Worth, and was listening to radio, and Jimmy Buffett came on and made me think of Hal and Mike and those guys, and the fact that Mike's no longer with us, he's just kind of broke my heart. It's just such a sad thing for college football. And he was such a unique person. And, those 2 guys changed the game probably as much as anybody really ever has. And they both came from really humble football backgrounds. You would expect some guys that were great players at these big institutions to be the ones really that changed the game. And those guys, did it at Hal at high schools throughout Texas, and then at Iowa Wesleyan Junior College, or Iowa Wesleyan College, and then went from there to Valdosta State, and then to Kentucky, and that's when I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with Mike and Hal was at Kentucky. And so, really special guys, outside the box thinkers, incredible problem solvers. Both of those guys just unique personalities. And like I said, I've got story after story, but I don't know that there's any of them I can tell on the radio.
Which doesn't surprise me.
Exactly right. Real quick, growing up with your dad, how big an influence was he on what you're doing now? And did he push you to that, or was it just something you fell in love with?
Yeah, my dad really honestly tried to talk me out of coaching many times. He just was like, it's a tough way to make a living, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and I had moved around a lot growing up. And so, my idea was to go someplace, and once I decided to coach, I wanted to go, stay at a high school and stay there and kind of work my way up and maybe become the head coach someday, and never really move. And of course, I've moved 23 times in my 53 years. So that plan didn't work out particularly well. But yeah, my dad, I think his biggest influence on me was not really from a football perspective, just from a personal perspective. We had completely differing opinions on how to win football games. He was kind of a defensive guy. I was brought up in the air raid with, like you said, Hal and Mike and those guys. And, my dad was a little bit more of a conservative thinker. I was a little bit more of a risk taker and all that. But the thing I learned from him more than anything else was just about relationships and how to treat people. And when he passed away 5 years ago, it was interesting. I kind of walked around and listened to the players talk, and not one of them talked about any football games. They all talked about, the relationships they had with my dad and the relationships they had with each other, and, how that they called him for advice when they were going to get married or when they had issues with their kids, or, all these different things. And so, I got a real sense to see what a big impact he made in those guys' lives. And, he was a really good football coach, but he was a whole lot better person, and really invested in those guys. And I think they all were better for having played for him. And I think that's our job as coaches, is to make sure that, young people are better off from having that relationship with us and being in our program. And, you hope you get them prepared to be husbands and fathers and successful people.
Well said. Absolutely. Coach Dykes, I want the audience to know, because we think about big time college football programs, you're coach of the year, you just were in the national championship game, you have access to private jets, you can go do what you want. You drove to San Antonio this morning, got up at 6 and hit the road from Fort Worth to drive down to speak to the quarterback club. You could have taken the jet. You could sleep in your bed tonight. I was surprised to hear you just got in the car and drove down.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of nice to get about 3.5 hours of just kind of quiet. I love music, and I had played some great music driving down, and really just tried to kind of relax and enjoy the drive. It's funny. I used to drive a lot in Texas, and just don't really get to do it much anymore. And so, I was kind of excited when I had an opportunity to do it, and watch the sunrise, and it was a nice drive down I-35, and no traffic in Waco anymore. They finally finished that construction, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Everybody's quality of life is better now. But yeah, it was a cool drive, and really enjoyed it, and going to get to spend some time down here. I think I'm going to the state capitol tomorrow. They're honoring the TCU football team in the Capitol tomorrow, and going to also try to do a little bit of work with Alzheimer's and some folks to talk about some Alzheimer's funding. My mom passed away from Alzheimer's, and so we're going to see that as an opportunity to visit with some people tomorrow to try to push some legislation through. And so should be an interesting couple of days. I love being this part of Texas. It's beautiful in San Antonio and Austin, and just looking forward to getting to spend some time down here.
Good deal. Coach, appreciate the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it, Coach. Sonny Dykes from TCU on the Blitz.